This is the story of OFFAL.
This is the story of OFFAL, the fifth quarter, the edible waste, the meat that got left behind.
The meat we ate 100 years ago was completely different from what we eat today. I can remember my dad harking back to brains for breakfast. I can put my hand up and say I've hardly eaten any of that kind of thing.
So, how did we get here? Let's go back to World War II.
Like all good stories.
Like all good stories. Every story begins at World War II. The distance between the point of production and the point of consumption never used to be that far. There was never that much distance, either geographically or figuratively, between the braying, breathing farm animal and the plate that the beast was eating off.
The animal was reared on a small family-run farm, killed in a small family-run abattoir, which was then processed in a small family-run butcher. So everyone in the industry knew each other.
Their friends, their pals. It's a small-scale local industry. Everyone's getting on.
Yeah, they're getting on. So that kind of provides a quality assurance.
And that was great. But then after World War II, everything changed. Because of rationing, production was centralised. It was a planned economy run by experts like J. Sainsbury. All of a sudden, instead of a small butcher buying, say, a week's worth of meat for his deli counter, you have a massive investor like J. Sainsbury's buying in advance 6 months worth of meat for, say, 100 supermarkets. Because they're spending so much money, they need to guarantee that they're going to get their money back at the point of sale. And the tried and tested way of doing that is by standardizing the product.
And so with the rise of standardized products, we move into the realm of carbon copy chicken breasts, identikit pork loin, meat wrapped in plastic, which looks the same, tastes the same, smells the same, might as well be the same.
Add to this the mad cow disease crisis in the 90s, at which point the government basically says to everyone, don't eat offal, it's dangerous, and people were scared off.
A massive network of supermarkets were, yeah.
So disrespectful, isn't it? Kids today, like, really, there's no hope. Absolutely no hope.
I can't believe the kids are trying to have fun on a Sunday. That's sickening.
Okay, so let's go pick up some meat.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really interesting to compare said plastic meat with offal.
So let's go pick up some meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that already.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to get those bits of meat together and see texture, smell, flavour.
So let's go to the supermarket. And so convenience replaced tradition. The housewife was sold her freedom in the form of ready-to-roast frozen chickens. No longer did she have to bathe tripe in lemon juice or tenderized giblets in ice water. Simply unwrap, season, and off you go.
Yeah, and another way supermarkets infiltrated the market was by making things cheap. You know, you can walk into a big supermarket and buy a dozen drumsticks for £5.50. Meat has never been this cheap.
And how did all the mad inconsistencies of the real world get transformed time and time again into the same product of the same weight and the same size?
Yeah. And the upsetting thing is that it abstracts the consumer from what meat is, you know, because a lamb still has kidneys, it's still got a heart, it's still got a liver, definitely has a head. And we don't see those on the supermarket shelves anymore. And that's a really upsetting thing because you're losing the connection to life. When you see hundreds of chicken breasts, hundreds of drumsticks on the shelf, you kind of forget that that's an animal.
And over time, as that process has happened, we get more and more used to the standardized product, and the other stuff becomes weirder and weirder, And today we're at the point where, you know, people will reel back at the sight or smell of a liver. So what does it mean if we don't eat offal?
I think the first point is that it's waste. If we're throwing away meat, we're throwing away wastage, and therefore we're increasing our carbon output.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, which is much harder to touch on, but we're going to revisit time and time again in this series, is that food is part of how we identify our culture. So who are we if we don't eat offal? On this series, we're going to talk offal. Food, the food we share and the food we don't, is one of the ways we construct identities. The food we share brings us together. The food we don't draws borders between us. And so let's take this opportunity to turn our tastes on their head and ask ourselves the question, isn't it really weird we don't eat offal? If we, the world, everything is global warming,